Hello, Broad Street. My name is Rachel Johnson. If you don't know me, I am one of your pastoral interns again. It is so great to be back with you, even in a season like this, maybe especially in a season like this. I woke up this morning wondering, like I do every morning, what day it is and what was on my to-do list, trying to get my bearings in this world that seems so out of time. And for some reason, I had the song Seasons of Love from the Broadway musical Rent stuck in my head this morning. So I turned it on as I was making breakfast, and as I was singing along, I realized that whatever memory magic brought this song to the forefront of my brain today was so much more on point than anything that my conscious mind could have produced on its own. If you don't know the song, it is a beautiful ballad all about how we measure a year. And if that isn't the question of 2020, I don't know what is. 525,600 minutes. How do we measure a year? In daylights, in sunsets, in midnights, in cups of coffee, in inches, in miles, in laughter, in strife. In 525,600 minutes. How do we measure a year in the life? Appropriate, right? How do we measure a year in this life? What would this song mean for us today? In daylights, in Zoom calls, in protests, in canceled weddings, in inches, in masks, in pet pics, in flames. So as I was singing along to this song, making my own version as I made myself breakfast, I asked myself those questions, and I realized that these were probably the same kinds of questions that Naomi would have been asking herself at the beginning of the book of Ruth in the passage that we heard today. How does she measure a year in her life? In daylights, in famines, in dead sons, in daughters-in-law, in inches, in grief, in widows, in tears. Naomi has lost her husband, both of her sons, her social standing, and all sense of security. She chooses to leave the place where she and her family made their home because her best option for survival is to beg for care from distant relatives in a place that she hasn't called home for who knows how long. I wonder how she would measure that year of her life, just like we are struggling to measure this year in our lives. Because it's a hard world. It's a hard world now. It was a hard world in the 80s when Rent takes place. It was a hard time in the world when the judges ruled. Time is elusive and unreal, and life is unmeasurable in huge ways and in minuscule ways. We have a hard time wrapping our heads around massive injustices and tragedies in our world. And I think we also have a hard time wrapping our minds around fully appreciating small daily moments of peace or joy. So the cast of Rent suggests a different measure of a year. How about love? How about love? How about we measure a year not in time, not in seconds or minutes or days or events, but in love? No, I'm not trying to get all toxic positivity here saying, oh, just look on the bright side, right? Measuring life in love doesn't mean that we're magically erasing or ignoring or somehow justifying hardship. We measure our life in love because it completes the story. I know that for me, this has been an extraordinarily difficult year. I was living in Berlin, Germany for my internship year for this program that I'm in. And I got called out of Berlin in the middle of my time there, sent back to a country with no universal health care or really any protections for people. I was uninsured in the middle of a global pandemic, learning to deal with a very new understanding of the role of anxiety in my life and facing the end of several different important relationships to me. There are so many different ways that I could measure this year in grief, in tears, in loss. And all of those are real measures. Those are real things. They aren't meant to be dismissed or glossed over or set aside. I don't want to do that. And there are also real ways to measure this year of my life in love. I fell in love with Berlin and so many people there. The relationships that ended were hard to lose because of the love that was in them. When I came back to the States, I rediscovered what home can feel like. The joy of being near family, which I haven't had in a really long time. Even entering quarantine, I reconnected with people who mean the world to me, who are all over the world. As we all got a little bit better at utilizing the gifts of technology to reach out in our isolation towards connection. And I think the biggest gift of all in my life in the last year is that I got to spend 5 months living with my mom, which is the longest consecutive period of time that I have spent with her since I was 5 years old. And I love her so much. And it was so wonderful to just be with her, even in the midst of such hard stuff. And she loves me so much. And that was a life-saving gift, is a life-saving gift. And I got to live with my bonus dad, who I had never spent that much time around either. And he showed me so much love too. And I love him so much too. And they stuck with me through all sorts of mood swings and depressive episodes, panic attacks, and just the general sense of melancholy and malaise. They bore with that with me. And I'm so grateful for their love. So often this is how God shows up in our lives. God doesn't magically take away our pain. God doesn't erase or negate our grief. No, even in the greatest depths of our despair and isolation, God promises to accompany us always. Like Ruth did with Naomi, God sticks with us. God shows up in the people who show up for us. Naomi in this story can't fathom that these two Moabite women, her daughters-in-law, would follow her into the massive uncertainty that was her future. She loves them and they love her, and that is so clear in the story from all of the embraces and kisses and tears that we read in the beginning of this first chapter of the book of Ruth. But she urges them to move on with their lives, to pursue their own hopes and futures, to be free of the burden that she sees herself to be. And Orpah chooses to go back home, and that's her right. There is no shame in that. Ruth, though, she issues this declaration of commitment to Naomi that is truly one of the most beautiful, desperate promises imaginable. Don't press me to leave you and stop following you. For wherever you go, I will go. And wherever you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God will be my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May Adonai bring curses on me, and worse as well, if anything but death separates you and me. Naomi couldn't see any reason why someone would stick with her in that moment. She couldn't see herself as worthy of love. It can be so hard to let ourselves be loved, can't it? And in the face of Naomi's despair, Ruth declares without a doubt that she has found her home in Naomi's company, wherever that might lead them both. So finally, Naomi stops protesting, and she lets herself be loved and cared for, even if she can't understand how or why. I don't know about all of you, but that is a deeply relatable sentiment for me. It can be so hard to see ourselves as worthy, to realize that people in our lives actually care about us, that there are some people, not everyone, but some people who truly will show up for you in genuine love. And again, that doesn't take away our pain. It doesn't fix the problems we're experiencing in our lives. It doesn't solve the tragedies. Even after Ruth's declaration of love and commitment, when they get to Bethlehem, Naomi still changes her name to Mara, which means bitter. Her pain doesn't go away because Ruth stuck with her, but her grief is shared and eased in the presence of this woman who loves her. We too are called to show up for each other, to love and tend to the people in our lives and communities. This showing up happens personally, and it happens on a bigger scale. It means something when we promise to go where our beloveds go. We are promising to accompany them in their struggles. When we claim that their people will be our people, we have to fight for that whole community. When we say, where you die, I will die, that's not just a turn of phrase. Ruth takes this promise seriously. She gives up her homeland, her religion, her independence. This is no idle promise for her. This is love. Beloveds, we are called to love one another, and we are called to let ourselves be loved. When we take that risk to love one another, to love and be loved, we find home in people, in each other. So, beloved, you are home. You belong. Where you go, we will go. Where you stay, we will stay. Your people shall be our people. Your God, our God. With us always, even to the end of the age. A measure of life in love. Amen.